Hello and welcome back to this Dumb for the Idealistic Crusade. This video will go over the latest pickups I have on DVD and Blu-ray from a mixture of some label sales and then stuff that I found locally in my usual browsing in used and other stores and comic stores and just wherever there is to be had, whether it's a bookstore, comic store, or what have you. But first off, I would like to lead with two discs that I was sent by Warner Brothers. These are two more of the rotted titles I had. And again, in my update video, I said that there were three other titles they were going to look for. So I sent them an email saying, there were three others that they might have and want to check for if they wouldn't mind. And then no real response, and then suddenly, like a week or so later, a mysterious box appears on my door, or I should say a little packet, because there were just two in there. And so these are the last two I needed, I guess, that they could technically replace. So from the Clark Gable Signature Collection, the John Ford directed Mogambo. And what's interesting about these two are actually pressed DVD copies, so they are not archive DVD-Rs. So again, I think it came from a different warehouse because I had a different location. I think it was in Nevada. So I guess they just looked around, and so it just depends on what warehouse they're going to have to look at. So I do encourage anyone, again, if you have any issues with Warner Brothers DVDs having the rot issue from the affected period of roughly 2006 to 2009, look at some of the videos I made on the issue. I compiled a list of various known affected titles and just send the service department, send them an email. You're probably not going to hear a whole lot back, or it's going to take them a lot of time to get to you, but hopefully you should be able to get some replacements issued. I was finally also able to replace the last Errol Flynn title I needed updating, which is the Dawn Patrol, the 1938 remake version. Again, this is also a press disc, so I'm finally able to replace the last title I needed in my Errol Flynn Signature Collection Volume 2 set, where pretty much every film but one had totally rotted. So it's taken a long while, but I've finally been able to replace all of those. So this pretty much takes care of all of the available titles that I needed to replace. So everything else, I just have a couple more that I have that are rotted that I need to replace that I'll have to seek out on the used market. I've already replaced some, but this thankfully took care of most of the others. And it's funny that I finally got that because locally I stumbled across the Warner Archive release of the original version of the Dawn Patrol, which I have always wanted to see since I really do enjoy the 1938 version, and I really think there was a nice focus on aviation films, of course, in the silent era with Wings, and then there are some other great gems from the early talkie period, like the great film The Lost Squadron. So this is wonderful, and now I can finally do a double feature. Interestingly, this is in a clear slim case, so I'm thinking maybe the original owner just put it in a slim case, or I don't know, it may have come from the factory like this. I've seen some Warner Archive releases have slim cases like this, so again, I don't know if that was just done originally or if it came from the archive that way. But again, this will be really great to be able to do a double feature, and Warner Archive has done a great job of getting some of these more obscure and older titles out in print finally. So this is just another one of the many archive discs that I've been meaning to check out. What's truly important about the Dawn Patrol and why I've been dying to see it for way too long is this is one of the first, if not the first, talkie that Howard Hawks made. And of course, anyone who knows Howard Hawks knows his lifelong fascination with aviation, not only in his personal life as an actual flyer, but also in his films. And there's seemingly a number of elements in this that will tie in to what we later see and what is, in my opinion, the great aviation film of them all, which is Howard Hawks' Only Angels Have Wings. And if I had to choose my favorite Hawks picture, it might be that one because it has literally everything. But this does really start to hint at what we think of and associate with Hawks, the sort of traditional male bonding and then bonding over the constant deaths of their comrades, which feels very much like what we see in Only Angels Have Wings. It was also written by John Monk Saunders, who had done the silent classic Wings, and himself was no stranger to this sort of material. And the funny anecdote is, of course, while they were making this film, Howard Hawks was suing them because he felt it was a ripoff of his film Hell's Angels. So, and I'm just fascinated to see this because this particular story being done as a 1931 early talkie, when you think of the other films that were talkies in that year, they were, of course, much more limited in the stories they were telling because it was a new medium. You couldn't move the camera like you could in the silent days. And, of course, the aerial combat footage, which is really fantastic, was reused in the 1938 remake because it's so good and it would have cost a fortune to reshoot it for the remake. They literally reused that. So I know I've at least seen those portions. I think they are edited a bit differently. I don't think it's a shot-for-shot reuse. But I have seen that footage because I've seen the remake version. I know the remake version will probably be a lot more polished, but I'm so fascinated to finally be able to see this and look at all of the what you would term the Hawksian themes that you see in other Howard Hawks films, particularly films dealing with aviation, and seeing them this early on in 1931, especially considering what other early talkies were like in terms of their more definite limitations compared to the ability to move the camera much more in the silent era. The film also won the Oscar for Best Story, which is a category that no longer exists, but basically it was the award for, I guess you would say, the best story concept is how that award worked when it existed back at the beginning of the Academy Awards. And of course, anytime Douglas Fairbanks Jr. is in a film, I have to see it because he's always incredible. So it'll be very interesting to see how he tackles this role. And then, of course, you can make the comparisons between the leads in this version and then the leads in the much more famous 1938 remake, which, of course, you have Errol Flynn, Basil Rathbone, and David Niven, which is a holy trio if there ever was one of great star actors. But I'm just beyond fascinated to finally be able to see this in its entirety because if I'm aware, I think this is the only video release this film has, and I don't think it has a VHS release. It was also retitled when the remake came out, so usually when it popped up it's got a different title. So I'm just so happy to finally have this so I can finally compare the two versions. Also from the archive, another film I've wanted to get on disc for far too long is 1953's Battle Circus, starring Humphrey Bogart, directed by Richard Brooks, and even the box claims it's a precursor to MASH because Bogey is playing a hard-bitten, weathered Korean War surgeon, and it's about the trials and tribulations of being in that particular part of the conflict. So I'm really wanting to rewatch this because I've seen it once before. I think it was probably on TCM, but I only have vague memories of it, and I am trying to beef up on the more obscure and lesser known Bogart titles. But again, the pairing of Bogart with Richard Brooks is a great idea, and I'm just really interested to see this again because I can only remember bits and pieces. But it is a standard archive release, no extras, but at least it is getting the film in print and using original poster artwork. Then really interestingly, in the discount copy, so in the dollar bin, they had a copy of Catch-22. This is the original 2001 Paramount widescreen DVD. This film is not available on Blu-ray, and I don't know if there's a rights issue or something, but I know others have tried to license it and have just never gotten to do so. So this is still the best version of the film available. It's a widescreen transfer. It has a 5.1 remix, but thankfully has the original mono track, and it does have a commentary with Mike Nichols and Steven Soderbergh. So I've been wanting to revisit this film for quite some time, and I like getting the original DVD presentations when I can because you get the nice interior art, the nice disc art, and the various reissues of this disc are the same disc, but they don't have the art and the insert and everything. So, of course, if given the choice, I'd rather get the original. And again, all the other DVDs are just represses of this one, so it's the same disc inside. So, and it's in perfect shape, so I don't know if it was mispriced or somebody just tossed it in the dollar bin, and then I stumbled across it. Next is a really underrated World War II film that unfortunately has gone out of print, and it's a Fox title, so that means it's under Disney, and there's no telling if it's ever going to get reissued again. This Blu-ray itself is it's problematic. It's not the best transfer in the world, and unfortunately, it doesn't have the original mono mix. But I couldn't leave it there because I've been wanting to find this, so I picked up the Blu-ray of Von Ryan's Express, the classic 1965 World War II vehicle starring Frank Sinatra, directed by Mark Robeson. This is a really underrated World War II film. If you haven't seen it, it has sort of the same vibes as The Great Escape, but it transitions onto a train, and there's some great train set pieces, and it's about basically a run for the border, and it's got great moments of suspense, and again, it's far better than you think it will be, and Sinatra, it does really, really well. So again, it's really effective. It's got a great ending. This Blu-ray unfortunately is out of print, so if you find this film, get a copy, because since it's Fox, it's under Disney, there's no telling if it's ever coming out again. It does have a handful of extras which were generated for the special edition DVD that came out pretty much concurrently or just before this release. It has a 5.1 lossless remix, but again, this film was originally released in mono, but you can hear the mono mix on the Laserdisc edition, which I have, and the very first DVD, which I think ports the LD master. So thankfully it's out there, but to get everything, you'll have to have one of those plus the special edition DVD or the Blu-ray. The transfer on here it's solid, but this film really needs a brand new scan, because honestly, the old versions look okay for their time, but this master, it was an improvement getting it in HD, but it's still not great. And I know there's some question about the color timing choices, and it really could use a brand new scan. This film could look and sound great. It really deserves to be rediscovered, because I revisited it when I picked it up on Laserdisc, and it was just like, wow, this is so much more intensive and better than I remembered, or its reputation would suggest. I would also say that if this happens, if this film gets reissued, please, whatever you do, stop this janky Photoshop art. I mean, this is fine, whatever. But they put the original poster art on the back, which was done by one of my favorite artists of all time, Frank McCarthy. And that image there of Sinatra jumping for the train with everybody behind him and the planes coming over the hill and everything. I mean, that's what movie art used to be. So let's just get back to that. I mean, no comparison. Seriously, come on. But yeah, this is a film that I really hope gets a new scan and reissued with its original mono mix, because it really is a great World War II film. It's on the short list of the great World War II adventure films. So if you haven't seen it, check out Von Ryan's Express. And again, it's out of print, so if you stumble across it, go ahead and pick it up, because you're probably not going to find it again for that cheap. Next, for my Micro Critique shelf, I picked up a Blu-ray I've wanted to get for a while, and this is the spiffier later release. They've done this film a number of times with the same disc over and over, but this is Paramount's Diamond Anniversary Edition of 1954's White Christmas. So this is the standard Blu-ray plus the 2-disc DVD set, so that's 3 discs, and then the 4th disc is a Christmas CD sampler of various holiday music classics. So it's not anything additional to the standard Blu-ray release, so you don't have to track down this particular edition, but the art's quite nice, and this slipcover is actually textured, so the Christmas tree type motif actually has this printed sort of shiny, starry type effect on it, so it has that sort of frosted snow look to it. So I have to admit, it's really nicely done. I'm not one for caring all that much about fancy slipcovers and steelbooks and things like that, but when it's something simple and very effective like this, then I can really appreciate it. So the breakdown is on here, and then you just slide out the standard case. And again, this was still sealed. So this is literally the 3 discs here, and then the little bonus CD is in a cardboard sleeve on the outside. So again, it's basically just the standard Blu-ray plus the additional swag, and it was extremely cheap and still sealed, so I couldn't believe that. So I finally was able to grab a copy of this. Then Eureka Masters of Cinema had a nice little site sale, as they usually do, and I finally was able to pick up 2 titles I've been really wanting to get, and especially wanted to get before the limited editions disappeared. So, of course, I've been wanting to get this since it was announced, and these films were done by Kino here in the U.S., but as separate editions. But I wanted to get the Eureka package, which brings them both together with some extras that are not on the Kino releases, and is numbers 245 and 246 of their Masters of Cinema series, as of course the John Ford double feature Hellbent with Straight Shooting. These are both brand new restorations that were done of two really fantastic surviving pieces of John Ford's silent film career, especially doubly important because it's preserving some of his work with the legendary Harry Carey Sr., and basically they are part of the bedrock and foundation of the very Western genre itself. Unfortunately, a great portion of their silent work is lost, so it's amazing that we have stuff that survives and that it's actually been restored. Again, this is a full 2-disc special edition set. These are the same restorations that Kino released here in the U.S., so they're not any different in those terms, but this is a much fancier package, and Eureka usually has better encoding and makes a spiffier presentation along with additional extras. You get a wonderful custom booklet in the limited edition. There are the 2 discs, so you get each film on each disc. And then the interior art is the reversible art, I should say, and it gives you the artwork for the other film, Hellbent. So let me slip these out here so you can see. There's the reversible art. I really love what they did with this. It looks fantastic, and this is something Eureka does. If it's a multi-feature set for the reversible art, they try to at least do another original poster artwork or representation of the other film, so you can choose which film you want to display, whether you want the interior one or the exterior one. So these are both from brand new 4K restorations, and what's beyond important about Straight Shooting is that it was actually Ford's first directorial credited feature, and the fact that he's doing it with Carey is just, that just adds to the importance. And when you look at Ford's filmography and look at just how many of his silent films are lost completely, it's amazing that this one has survived, and that both of these films were restored in 4K. They both have Joseph McBride audio commentaries, who wrote the fantastic book Searching for John Ford. If you haven't read it, please go and do so. There's a new piece by Kim Newman, and anytime Kim Newman talks, anytime he opens his mouth, we're all just sitting there and just like, and then it's over, and we're like, we need 3 more hours of that if you don't mind. So, there's other various video essays, archival audio interviews, and then the limited edition booklet as well with some nice essays. So I've been wanting to get this ever since it came out, and you always wind up putting stuff off, and then eventually there's a sale, and then you're like, oh crap, I haven't gotten that yet, and I don't want to miss out on the limited version, because I'll admit I've missed out on way too many Eureka editions, so I couldn't let this one pass, and I will be doing a full review as soon as I get the time. But again, it's just amazing these exist and have been restored this way, and Eureka has done a beautiful package that I do think is a stronger release overall than the standalone Kino editions, which themselves are solid. But if you're region free, if you have that capability, I think this is one of those times where the Eureka release does make a significant improvement over the US editions. The same goes for the other one that I picked up. Again, one I really wanted to get and was afraid about missing out on the limited edition. So I picked up their release of the Universal's Inner Sanctum Mysteries. These were restored and released here on Blu-ray in the US by Mill Creek, who doesn't have the greatest reputation in terms of Blu-ray presentations. And then Eureka did them, and as they've been doing with select Universal titles, they've been doing these nice limited edition sets every once in a while based around a theme. But here they bring together all of the Inner Sanctum films, which of course were based on the famous Inner Sanctum radio series, which was a suspense horror series. Universal took that idea, turned it into this series that is loosely linked by all starring Lon Chaney Jr. in some fashion, as sort of the through line between them all, but they're all standalone films. And they were very much it's pretty obvious they were designed to, at least in some ways, mimic the success that RKO was having with Val Lewton's B horror unit and the iconic masterpiece Lewton horror film, starting with Cat People. So these films are perhaps the most obvious attempt to do something similar, and it is really striking seeing Universal in the Silver Age of horror doing something that wasn't just monsters and trying to do something that was a bit more, shall we say, intellectual and not a cheapy B horror movie and not another Frankenstein sequel or a Wolfman sequel. So they are a mixed bag, I will admit. There are some that are better than others. They're not going to be for everyone, but if you're a classic horror fan, these are really musts if you haven't seen them. And the cleanup work done on them is rather impressive. They were cleaned up a bit for DVD, and then that DVD set went out of print. The only issue with this is one of the films has... I know from reading the various reviews and stuff, one of the films isn't up to the same quality level as the others, but I think that seems to be just an element issue, that there weren't as good elements for that particular film. But that is something that pretty much everyone has noticed in picking up either release. The masters are the same, the actual restoration and presentation. So this is the same thing as what you're getting on the Mill Creek set, but here you get more extras and better encoding and frankly much nicer artwork in the limited edition with the booklet. So if you're interested in these films or you're a classic horror lover, I do recommend these, just with the caveat that these are still 1940s Universal B programmers, so they didn't have the greatest budgets in the world, but there's a charm to these, and it's really cool seeing Lon Chaney Jr. thrown into them, and they're trying to do some of the Val Lewton style, and being a Lewton fanatic, I can't help but be fascinated by supposedly the mortal enemy of the of the Lewton unit, Universal, and their horror department doing a sort of Lewton-esque type thing. So there's a charm to it in that sense as well. So I will also be doing a review on this when I get the time. I know I sound like a broken record on that, but I can't wait to look at these, and there's tons of audio commentaries and new extras, so this will be wonderful, and of course it makes for great October viewing. Whenever I can find an indicator title, particularly when they're floating around on eBay here, and I don't have to worry about importing them, it's like, whoa, is that an indicator disc? And lo and behold, this was a lovely brand new copy, and it's the limited edition, so it's always cool when you get one of those before they're all gone and you don't get the awesome indicator booklet. This is part of a series of films, the Charles Bronson filmography. Particularly, a lot of his 70s films have been released by a number of different labels. Indicator started releasing some from the Sony Masters. So this is their Spine 212, which is the film The Valachi Papers, which was directed by Terrence Young, which is the main draw for me, being a giant Terrence Young fan and Bond fanatic. And I think with the various Bronson films, there is always something of interest in there, even if they don't have the greatest reputation in the world, and a lot of people are going to them simply for being Charles Bronson fans. This one I haven't seen in a while, and I've wanted to get this indicator release because it has, as typical with indicators, some really great extras. And again, it's the limited edition, so it has their wonderful thick booklet that, and my favorite touch that I talk about every single time just because I think it's the coolest thing in the world, the back of it always has a production still of the director. So there is Terrence Young on the set, and of course looking dapper as always. So I can't wait to dig into this. It looks fantastic, and again, they've outdone themselves with the limited edition booklet. And then last are three more recent Warner Archive titles that they're just, even with the slower release slate that they're having for this year, they are just cranking out brilliance left and right. And to be honest, I don't mind if they're doing 1 to 3 releases a month, because at least they're still paying attention to quality over quantity. And when they're doing some of these titles, it's just, it's beyond words. So to start with, they announced and then released a brand new restoration of the 1937 original version of A Star Is Born, directed by William Wellman. This is an incredible film that has long faced element problems, especially being an earlier color film. Most versions of this look pretty terrible. It also was sort of labeled public domain in ways for a number of years, so there were tons of terrible editions and transfers floating around, and you could even find awful looking versions online. Before this, the only really watchable, decent version was the older restoration attempt that Kino Lorber had put out on Blu-ray, but even that had a lot of limitations. So this is brand new work, and I really do like the art, even though it's black and white. It's very striking and very simple, and it makes it stand out. And of course, now you know this is the new restoration version. In terms of the extras, it does include some vintage radio theater broadcast versions, along with the original trailer and some classic Warner Brothers cartoons. So it's a very simple, no frills type cover design, but it is holding just an incredible restoration work. I cannot wait to pop this into my player and then do a full review. Again, I have only seen this film looking pretty bad, so I've read the reviews about this, and everybody's pretty much gushing. So this is another of the key, unbelievably important Warner Archive releases for this year. Some people believe this is the best version of the story. I if I had to choose one version of A Star Is Born, I would probably say this one. It's rather neck and neck with this one and the George Cukor, Judy Garland 1950s version. They're all good in their own ways, but this one and the Cukor 50s version, I think, have the most special magic to them, and that they are both great films. So I can't wait to see the restoration of this and see what it looks like, because again, before this point, this film has always looked pretty terrible. Next was a real surprise. This is definitely digging into the vault, and I can't wait to see the transfer on this. This is 1943's Edge of Darkness, which is one of the great World War II vehicles for Errol Flynn. If you didn't see the TCM Spotlight Collection DVD box set, which actually got right here, this brought together the various World War II Errol Flynn vehicles, and all of them are great films, and they're very much all over the map in terms of tone. The first film, Desperate Journey, is very much Ocean's 11 type romp behind enemy lines, not really gritty and dark. And then you come to this film, which was directed by Louis Milestone, who of course made All Quiet on the Western Front, so you know tonally what you're going into. And it's not your traditional Flynn in a heroic type role. He is part of an ensemble. This is a village that is being overrun by Nazi forces, and then being essentially beaten down and deciding to take a stand, and realistic consequences happen. This is a surprisingly gritty film for the 1940s, and for being produced as a wartime film, which most wartime films that explicitly dealt with the war in Hollywood were much more designed to be morale boosters, because that's what they needed, especially for the home audiences who were primarily working in defense factories all day long. You didn't want films that were very much gritty and realistic and definite downers. This film is. It doesn't pull back, and it's got great moments for Errol Flynn, but especially for Ann Sheridan, who is one of my all-time favorite actresses of classic Hollywood. And what happens to her character in this film is actually it's very surprisingly dark, and then how she is able to get over it and deal with that particular pain. There's a particular moment towards the end of the film where her character is snatched, and it leaves little to the imagination. And again, for a 1943 film, they're getting away with a lot more because it's a wartime film. Otherwise, none of this would be allowed under the production code. You can definitely tell it's Louis Milestone directing this. If you've seen All Quiet on the Western Front, this has a lot of those same themes. So if you ever wondered if he made another film like that, well, here it is in Edge of Darkness. This has some vintage Warner Brothers shorts and a cartoon, plus the trailer. and the now sort of new standard archive type design. But again, this was a total surprise. We all want more Flynn titles on disc, but you definitely think the bigger titles would get out first on Blu-ray as opposed to the much more niche World War II films. But I am still super happy because this is a wonderful film and very much not what you would expect from a Hollywood 1940s World War II film. And then lastly, it was another archive title that was on sale, so this was dirt cheap for under $10. Is the 1958 Party Girl, directed by Nicholas Ray. This is a Nicholas Ray color scope extravaganza that is essentially Ray getting to do a gangster film, but with some slight musical elements. I've only seen little bits of this. I've always wanted to see this in its entirety, and I've wanted to see more of Ray's filmography. I do think Ray was an incredible talent, but a very, very troubled individual with much internal turmoil that found its way into his films. If you haven't read it, or if you want to know more about Ray, check out Patrick McGilligan's biography of Nicholas Ray, which is outstanding. That's a fantastic book. So of course, reading that made me want to dig out all of the more obscure, lesser known, or lesser discussed Nicholas Ray films. So this is another Warner Archive Blu-ray that's been on my wish list for too long, and again, it was dirt cheap. It's amazing how inexpensive some Warner Archive titles turn up for. They really fluctuate in price a lot on Amazon, so if you watch them long enough, you'll see titles like this pop up, and I think this was like $8.75 or something, so that's just insanely cheap for a Warner Archive title. So of course, it was already on my wish list, but that was like, okay, yes, that's a done deal. So that's it for this particular video. Again, just various things that I picked up in some label sales and stuff I stumbled across in local stores. So as always, I'd love to hear about what you may have picked up on disc or what you're excited for in terms of what's coming out. And as always, keep your disc spinning, keep physical media alive, keep supporting boutique labels and studio labels. And thanks ever so much for watching.